Adidas Guy here. This time we're going to be going over the clutch lever. I'm going to show you how to replace the clutch lever, and I'm going to show you the pitfalls and problems that can occur when you're trying to replace it. It looks relatively simple. You have a perch with a lever, a cable coming off of it, an adjuster, and a switch. Now this switch changed in 1997, so older clutch levers will not work on a newer bike, and I'm going to show you why. But newer clutch levers from 97 on will work on the older bikes with the older type of switch. Let's see why there's a problem. The clutch lever on the GS500 has a little hole, and this little hole right here is where that switch goes. This happens to be an SV650 or a Katana. Sometimes they're kind of interchangeable, and I forget exactly which one this is, but I think it's a SV650. It has a similar switch to the GS500, this little switch right here. However, there's a difference in the lever. This lever can be taken out without removing the switch. The reason for that is that the switch simply slides into this little notch. Let's come back to the GS500 switch and the GS500 lever. Remember, I pointed out that the switch goes in this little hole. When the switch is sticking up in this little hole, there's no place for it to go if you try to take the lever off. You try to pull the lever off and you're going to break the switch. Let's look at that again. Here we happen to have the switch, and when we go to take a clutch off, we want to adjust the adjuster all the way in. We line up those little holes there, slide the cable out, and out comes the cable. We can do this on the bike. I'm showing it here on the bench just because it's a little bit easier. Now, to take off the switch, we're going to wait. We're going to take the lever off first. And for that, you're going to need a 10mm socket. And undo the nut on one side. And I'll take my 10mm wrench and hold the other side. Wrong one. Helps if I grab the right wrench. Okay, I'm undoing the bolt. Whether you have an E or an F model bike, you can take this off on the bike without having to remove the fairing and without having to take the handlebars off. Okay, that nut comes off. Then the bolt comes out, and you'd think the clutch lever will come off, but it won't. The clutch lever happens to be held in because the switch is in this little recess. If I didn't know that, and if I listen to my friends that say, you don't have to take the switch off, I don't have to do it on my bike, well, guess what? If I yank on this really hard, I'm going to break that switch. And if I didn't know I have to take that switch out, that's what I would do. I would think it's caught up on something. I'll yank it and the switch will come out and break. So when you take the clutch lever off, you really want to take the switch off first. Okay, here's our switch. This is our switch right here. This is our clutch safety switch. And as I said, it goes in this little slot right here. And when it's in that slot, if you pull on it, you're going to break that off. Now let's look at the difference between the old clutch levers and the new ones. This happens to be an older style clutch lever. It has a recess, but the recess is not as deep. This happens to be the newer clutch lever. The recess is deeper. If I measure this with my calipers, it's about 0.25, 0.26 inches deep on the newer lever. On the older lever, it's about 0.13, or about half the depth. What's going to happen if I have the old lever and I try to put it on my bike, which happens to have the newer switch, I'm going to break my switch, and I will show you why. First, let's put the lever in. And my nut was right there. I'll loosely put that on just to hold it in place. Now comes the time to put the switch in. You can look down in the switch and you can see the contacts. On this one, they're right there. You can't really tell it very much from the back. So the contacts have to be closed when the clutch lever is pulled in. So if I look at my switch, right now it's closed and I've got my clutch lever down, so it would go in this way. Or conversely, I can move the switch over to the other position so that the contacts are open and it goes in with the clutch lever up. If I try to put it in the wrong way, it's not going to go. So I put it in the right way. But remember, I've got the wrong clutch lever. I've got the newer one. Or I've got the newer switch and I've got the older lever. Look what happens. I'm pushing on the switch and trying to push it down flush and it won't go flush. That's because the little nib on this switch happens to be longer than the nib on the older switches. So if I were to put this in and tighten it down and try to use my clutch lever, I'm going to destroy my switch, and that's $14.95 that I'm going to have to cough up to get a new one. You saw it wiggling. Let's put the correct lever in with this switch. I'm looking at the lever, and let's just be sure we've got the right one by measuring the depth. And we do, about 1/4 of an inch. So we'll put our bolt in. Put the nut on. Little word of advice here: when you're actually putting it back together, put a little bit of thread lock on that nut. And also grease your parts. Now, let's close our switch. Okay, we've got our switch in the correct position, and now look what happens. The switch is sitting down flush, and I can easily move the lever. I'm not going to break the switch. If you happen to break the switch, the two wires that come off of here, all you have to do is short them together, and that overrides the switch. And if you override the switch, then you're going to be able to start your bike. Also, if you happen to put the switch in the wrong way, which you can do, you'll find that you can start the bike with the lever out, but if you pull the clutch lever in, the bike won't start. That's because you got the switch backwards. If you happen to have an F model, you don't have to take the fairing off in order to replace the clutch lever. Have your bike on the center stand and be able to turn the handlebars freely. And you'll find that right under here, you can easily get to that nut, and you can get a wrench on the top in order to take it off. Not a hard thing to do, so don't worry about the fairing. You don't have to take it off. You can do most of the work and most of the minor work on your bike without having to take the fairing off. And one of the first things we want to do in order to take the clutch lever off is to loosen up the cable. So we come down here where the clutch goes into the engine, lift up the little boot, take my 12 and my 10mm wrench. The 12 goes on the nut, hold it with my 10, loosen the nut, and this doesn't have a lot of room, but I would screw this in order to free up the cable here. Since we're going to be putting on a lever that's the same as what we took off, and we are not changing the cable, you might want to mark the nut and count how many times you turn it in, so when you're finished, turn it back out the same amount, and your clutch cable will be adjusted about the same as it was, and it should make things go a little bit simpler for you. Okay, we have this in. Now we're going to go up to the rest of the bike, and we're going to start on the handlebars. Well, I have in hand the tools I'm going to need to do this. Since I'm working around the tank in this area, I'm going to protect my tank so that I don't accidentally damage it. For that, I happen to have a big piece of neoprene. You might want to use a big towel, a rag, or something else. When you're working in this area, if you happen to drop a tool, you might chip your tank. There, we've got our tank protected. And I can also use this as a place now to set my tools. First thing we do, we lift up this little boot. There's a nut that he's on, and we wiggle him a little bit and slide him back. Get him out of the way. Now, we want to loosen this nut right here. That's the lock nut. And then we're going to screw the adjuster in order to give us as much free play as we need. And if we can, we're going to go in all the way. But let's turn it back a little bit so that everything is lined up. Come back out one more. Okay, there, everything is lined up. Now I'm going to pull back on the cable and see if I can get him out. Okay, this bike, the cable is very, very tight. And hard to get out. But a little pull and I might get him out. If not, there we go. If I couldn't get him out, what I would do is I would take the switch off and the nut off first. But if you can get the cable off, it's nice to get it off first and get it out of the way, because that frees it up. It gives you full control over the lever so that you can move it in and out. Now let's take the nut off. Okay, let's make sure our socket wrench is going the right way. So reach up underneath. There we go. Now that it's loose, I can turn it by hand until it comes off completely. Almost off. A little bit more, and there we go. Now I'll pull the bolt out, but no, I won't. And you know why? It's because I need to take the switch off. This bike has the older switch. And the way you can tell the switch is instead of being gray, you have wires going inside of a little plastic cap right here. I will give you a little warning on this switch. Be very careful when you take it off. Pieces will fall out. There's one screw. Here comes the other screw. And carefully okay, it stayed in. There is a little wiper for the switch. It's this little thing. If you drop it, you can lose the parts. There's a piece of plastic, a brass wiper, and a spring inside of it. And then we have a PC board here. So let's remember which way it goes in, so when we go to put it back on, we get it the right way. Okay, that's off. I'll set that down with my other screw, and I will set the wiper down. Now, all I have to do is finish taking the bolt out, and there's my clutch lever. it's taken out. We notice the deep slot. This is backward compatible. This will work on a new or older bike. This happens to be a very high quality LSL lever out of Germany. They're not available in the US. You have to order them direct from Germany. But it is the only truly adjustable clutch lever for the GS500. That's because the GS500 is very popular in Germany. After you have your clutch lever removed, take the opportunity to lube your clutch cable. You'll get longer life out of your clutch cable and you'll get better operation out of your clutch lever if you have your cable properly lubed. Reassemble your clutch lever in the reverse order of which you took the parts off. Put the lever on, put the switch on, making sure the switch is put on correctly, and then put the cable on. After you've done all of that, follow the directions in the Haynes, Clymer, Suzuki manual, or on the GS Twins site for the proper adjustment of the clutch lever and for proper free play. Well, this has been Adidas Guy. Enjoy your GS500 and happy riding.